Al started training, showing, and competing with horses in the early 1960s. He has experience in racing, halter, reining, western pleasure, barrels, poles, and dressage. He's won several major championships in Mexican charro, and overall he has won over 300 trophies and awards. Al was the first to train a horse to follow the beat of a song and has the world's only true dancing horses.
To all my friends around me, I'd like for you to know this golden horse I'm riding is going to do a show. And when he hears the band play, he likes to jump and prance. And when he hears a cumbia, you know he wants to dance.
Hi folks, I'm here today with Diane and Terry Nielsen from the Texas Horse News. They called me up and asked me if we could do an interview for their newspaper, and I accepted, but I thought perhaps you might like to hear some of the questions they might want to ask me. Terry and Diane, welcome.
Thank you so much, Al. We're excited about being here with you.
For starters, Al, who is Al Ragusin?
Wow, okay, Terry. I started training horses. I guess the best way to put it is that when I was 6 or 7 years old, I had the chance to see my very first horse. And the reason why I mention this is because I'm a fisherman's son, and I was laying on the floor sleeping where I normally slept by the door. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, it was a moonlight night, and a horse appeared. Now, you got to realize that we're in a seaport town, and there was no horses. So that was my first horse, and the smell was what woke me up. And I still have that smell today. I still have that same excitement that I had back that many years ago. And so it's been my quest through life is to try to find out as much about the horse as I possibly can. And that's why I have done a whole lot of different things. I started training for showing, not training people, but training for showing back in the early 60s. I started riding in about the 50s. I have a lot of people that ask me, you know, you've been training for 47 years, well, just how old are you? And I said, well, I'm 49. I started when I was 2 years old, but not really. But back in the 50s, and so I started training horses, and it got to a point, Terry, to answer that question, that I just wasn't getting anywhere. I bought all the magazines there were about horses, the charros, the cowboys, the dressage people, and I just seemed like I would go and try it, and it didn't work for me. I didn't realize until many years later that you just have to have the experience with different horses in order for you to try to understand where the horse is coming from. I think I was like everybody else. I had the romantic notion that the horse was, if I fall, he was going to keep me from falling, and he was going to save my life. He was going to be like a dog, a companion, and I found out later he wasn't, but doesn't mean that I don't love him as much. I still love him just as much. I just understand him. So I just started doing this, and this is where I'm at.
Take me back to that little boy. Tell me a little bit more about the name Ragusin. That's an interesting name. What is your origin?
I've had that, Diane. A lot of people ask me that. And my grandfather came from Austria, and his name was Ragusin with a CH. And he met my grandmother that was from Spain. I don't know if they were on the same ship together or they met at Ferris Island. I don't know. But in either case, they got married and had my dad. So he was half Austrian and half Spanish. My dad in turn married my mother, who is half Mexican and half German. So whatever that is, that's where I'm at. But somewhere down the line, my grandfather had the CH taken off because a lot of people had a lot of problems pronouncing it. So he took the CH off. And they said, well, if it's Ragusin, then it should be Ragusin. And I go along with that. So I asked my dad, why did we start saying Ragusin when it's Ragusin? And he said, well, I was born and raised around the Mexican people, and they would call me Ragusin, which is the way you pronounce Ragusin in Spanish, and so we just took off.
Well, and it really works, and I think it explains about your horsemanship. I think it's genetic.
Could be.
And tell me a little bit about your techniques, Al. How is your training going to help me as a backyard rider? You know, I don't ride for show. I just ride for pleasure.
Well, that was one of the things that that I thought about when we started making these videos. One of the things that I noticed, Diane, and let me just kind of back up a little bit on Terry's question. I started reading in all these books and stuff, and I realized that it wasn't helping me. So I knew I had to go out and develop my own system. And I developed these double reins. I've been doing it for 47 years, but the people that I've been teaching, and my students, they'll learn in a fraction of that time, because it took me that long before I could establish, number one, how the horse thinks, number two, how to communicate with him, and then what the proper tools are for me to communicate with him. And so where it helps you is that you can bypass all of those years that I was looking, and you can go to the double reins. Like, for instance, I didn't invent double reins, but the technique in which to use them, I did. Now, I can help folks as long as they will use it, the double reins I'm talking about, use them in the manner that they need to be used. If I took a set of double reins and I asked you to hold them here and have your arms in this position, I'll teach you how to ride. But if you push them over the top of the horse's head, you need not buy any of these double reins, because they're not going to do you any good. Mm-hmm. You need to get the full advantage of the double rein. The one rein technically keeps the control of the horse up and down. The other one keeps it this way. So actually you have the horse in better control. And then with the proper saddles for the first time, for all of you first-time riders, I recommend the saddles that I do, the Australian saddle in this case, because it keeps you in the saddle and it keeps you more secure. Now, after you learn to ride and you have all that confidence, then you can go on and do whatever you want. You might want to buy a better Australian saddle. You may want to buy a Western saddle or English saddle or dressage saddle or what have you. I just think it's safer.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been very successful at what you do. How can you make sure that other people are going to be successful? How can you assure that?
First of all, I guess the first thing I need to do is ask someone, what do you want from your horse? I guess that's where we need to start. Some folks might just want a pet. They make great pets, and they can pet them and do whatever they want. Now, some folks might say, well, I want just to have him around for the kids to enjoy. Others may say, well, I want to trail ride, or another says, I want to one day be in competition. So I think that you have to ask yourself what you want to do. Now, in this case, I can show you and I can assure you with my method of training, Terry, exactly what I'm trying to do, as long as you try it my way and do it the way it was supposed to be done. Did I answer that question, or did I bypass you there?
No, I think you answered the question. You've been very successful. How many competitions do you think you've been in over the years?
Oh, maybe I shouldn't say that because people figure how old I am, but just hundreds. I wouldn't know where to put them. It's kind of like someone asked me one time, how many horses have you ridden? I don't know, hundreds, maybe even into the thousands. I don't know, quite a few.
So you consider yourself very well-rounded, not specific to any one discipline?
That's correct. I respect all the disciplines. And a lot of times people ask me, why do you not wear Western clothing? And I would say, well, I was a cowboy for over 20 years. I was also a charter for a number of years. I was also dressage for a number of years. I also did English for a number of years. And I don't feel that I'm really any of those. I just feel that I am a horseman. I dedicated my whole life to the horse. I never really did very many events with cattle. I wasn't interested in that. And except for the bullfighting. And then let me talk a little bit about that, if you guys will. Bullfighting is really not the term that should be used, because, like, say, bullfighters in the rodeo, the clowns are the bullfighters in the rodeo. Well, they're there for a specific reason, and that's just to help keep the cowboys safe. And also they have competition that they call bullfighting between each one of them, but they really don't fight the bull. They play with him and try to stay out of his way. Well, bullfighting, the way we did it, was the same thing. We just did it off of a horse, and we tried to keep the bulls off of the matadors, and then we would play And so actually it's bull playing, because for instance, what we would do is like the bull would come at me and he'd paw like he's getting ready to charge. Well, I'd get across from him and I'd paw too. And of course, that'd irritate him even more. So he'd rush me, and when he ducks his head to hook me, I'd jump right over the top of him with my horse. So then as he turns around looking for me, thinking, well, what happened to him, you know? And that's what we did. It was playing with the bull, but it's called bullfighting. I never hurt any animal. I wouldn't hurt any animal. That's not my method. And I don't want, now there are bullfighters that kill bulls and stuff, but that's a whole different category.
So your focus then is not on harming a horse in any way when you're doing the training.
Exactly.
It's more of a kinder and gentler technique. You're not trying to hurt them. You're not trying to beat them about the head and shoulders, in other words, to make them do what you want.
Exactly.
You prefer to use it as a gentle horsemanship?
Yes, but at the same time, Terry, I want people to know the truth. And why it's so important for them to know the truth, I want them to know what they're up against. When they're taking on a 1,000-pound animal or a 1,200-pound animal, you need to know what he thinks of you.
Yeah,
and
a horse can hurt you very badly if he has to.
Exactly, and so I need to tell you the truth. I don't want to lie to you. I'm going to tell you exactly. And in our first video, we did that. We showed you how he thinks, and we showed him the herd instinct, some of the herd instinct that they had, where it pertains to us riding him. He has a lot of herd instinct that we could go into, but basically what we're going to be facing when we ride him. And what I use is, I call it negative reinforcement. One of the things that I mentioned at one of the videos, and I'll mention it again, my biggest trainer that trained me was a little bee. I had some mares with colts, and one morning I'd have a habit of getting my cup of coffee and I'd go out to the fence and I'd watch them. Well, I saw one of the colts trying to nurse his mother, and his mother was moving around because there was a little bee above her and she was switching and she wouldn't stand still, and he was very irritated. Then the little bee came next to him and he just looked at it like a little thing like that. I mean, all of a sudden that thing hit him. And oh my goodness, he started jumping up and down and swishing his tail. And I thought to myself, there it is. That's the secret to training horses. Make him uncomfortable. Because remember, Diane and Terry, they don't want you to do this. But they will accept you if you show them respect and you show them leadership like they've learned in the herd.
You just said some important words, respect and leadership. And also, I'm thinking, you know, people are all unique and different. Do you find the same is true with horses, or are they all alike?
No, absolutely not. Every single one is different. I just mentioned I've ridden hundreds, and I can't compare any of the two. But I will say one thing to you, that they'll all have two things, or really three things in common. They all can associate, they all can anticipate, and they'll all learn through repetition. So we take a cue, whatever the cue may be, and we extend that cue. And that's what my dancing horses is all about. It's just refined cues. Refined so much that horse people can't tell what I'm doing. When I'm twitching, I can twitch my foot, and that means one thing.
So going back to your basic premise of, would you call it more aversion? In other words, are you teaching the horse to move away from pressure, move away from discomfort? What are you actually trying to accomplish there?
I'm teaching him to respond to my cues. I'm not necessarily teaching him to walk away from a cue, or I'm trying to communicate with him through cues. And this can entail a bunch of different things. For instance, if I want him to move away, if I have him here on a lead rope and I want him to move away from the crop that I have, I'll reach over and irritate him with that crop. Mm-hmm. And I'll just irritate him and he'll move away. In that instant, I want him to move away. I may, in another instance, take him and want him to go back this way, and I will advance this cue over here and get him to go back. So not necessarily is he going to give to each one of the cues. Does that answer it?
So your cueing then would be in various manners at various times depending upon what you want the horse to accomplish.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Are all horses born to be dancing horses?
I have been asked that. In fact, I was asked by our photographer on the way up here, and he was asking me that. Any horse that will respond to a cue, regardless of the horse, can be a dancing horse. In fact, one of my best dancing horses is a quarter horse. Now, the horses have different movements. I think Terry said this over breakfast this morning when he was talking. He said he was talking about a thoroughbred that he had trained, and he was telling me that the thoroughbreds reach out, and so does the quarter horse. Whereas the Andalusians, you never see Andalusian races because they have this movement. So we can take advantage of that movement. I always say this to someone that's starting to train a horse, to either in dressage or anything, is to let the horse show you what he can give you. Every horse has a different thing. Every horse can give you something. Let me just say, for instance, I have a horse that when he's dancing, his head's going from side to side. Well, I found out early in his training that whenever I would overforce him to extend a leg out, he would have to do this in order to get it stretched out. Mm-hmm. And so I just encouraged it, just do it. And then what I had to do was set the cue so that the horse would fall on cue, which, by the way, would fall on rhythm with the song. So I would go boom, 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 and so I could follow the rhythm of the song.
So are you saying anyone can teach their horse to dance?
Oh, you bet. You bet. But they have to have a basis. They have to have somewhere to start.
And a sense of rhythm.
And a sense of rhythm.
Yeah, there are those of us that don't have a whole lot of sense of rhythm.
Because what you have to do is you have to get him to move on rhythm. Actually, he's not dancing. It's actually you're dancing. And you're just like the puppet master. Remember the old puppets where they used to make them look like they were dancing with all these strings?
Marionettes?
Yes, and they were doing all of this, and they would control this hand with this finger. And well, that's what you're doing on the horse. Now, anyone can do it as long as you're willing to put the time. But I tell everyone in my videos that this is my basic technique. This is not basic technique. This is my basic of my system. If they will learn to ride like this, they can take it to any level they want to. I look at the dancing horse as a PhD. I look at him probably about the highest thing that you can get at. And I've had this people ask me this question. They'll say, which of all the horses that you've ridden, the reining, the cutting, all of the bullfighting, which is the most difficult? Well, it's the bullfighting. Because when I was in dressage or let's say reining or Western pleasure, and they asked for a right lead and I didn't hit it just right, I didn't win the trophy. In the bull ring, it's a different story. You don't hit that lead, you're going to get hurt or you're going to get your horse hurt. So you have to have a very courageous horse, a horse that's going to listen to you and really not pay any attention to that bull, which is pretty hard for any horse to do when that thing is charging you, and his natural instinct is to flee, get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
So you're taking into consideration the fight or flight syndrome with the various stimuli that are going into the horse.
Exactly. Exactly. I'll tell you this, I don't have all the answers, guys. I have maybe some. I have more to learn than I could ever teach. I'll tell you that right now. I don't think we'll ever stop learning. Every day I learn something new. So to answer your question, what is my goal now is to try to pass on this method of riding and let everybody ride secure. Terry, I want to say another thing. When we first started to do these videos, I hesitated because I knew I was going to have to tell everyone the truth, exactly how the horse looks at this, as my 47 years had shown. And I knew that probably there's some folks out there that didn't want to hear it. And I think that was the hardest part for me. But in order for me to tell a young person how to ride a horse, I have to make him understand what he's up against. And that's the only way I can do it, is the way I'm doing it.
Do you think everyone should have the experience of horses?
Oh, we're going to get into one little area here, Terry. I see what you're doing. You're corralling me into a corner. Yes. I'm just going to come right out and say it. Yes. When I was first learning how to ride, I got real frustrated. I got to a point that I just didn't want to hear anybody else's version of it anymore, because I would run home and I couldn't wait to try it. And I'd go to a seminar and I'd run home and I tried it, and it didn't work. And so, well, so much for that one. Then I go to another one that looked real interesting, and I do the same thing.
So many people do what I call 90-day wonder training. They feel that in 90 days or 60 days, or in some cases 30 days, that they're going to have this absolutely perfectly trained animal that will do everything they ever ask it under any circumstance. Do you believe in that?
Absolutely not. There's no way. This method I'm showing the folks, all of you out there right now, method I'm showing you is going to take a lot of time. It's not anything you're going to do overnight. First thing you got to do is get in tune with your horse. And I tell people, if you're riding your horse, don't let anyone else ride him. You stay on this horse. Get to know him, get to know his habits, get to know his moods, get to know everything about him. Because if you're riding him and you're teaching him one way and somebody else gets on him and goes back to riding the way they do, it confuses the horse. He needs to learn your way.
So do you think the rider and the horse can learn perfection in 90 days?
No, perfection, no. But
Good.
they
I'm glad to hear you say that. There isn't much in the way of perfection out there.
No, but they can learn the basics. Now, let me say this, that the horse is always trying to figure a way to get out of the situation.
Kind of like teenagers.
Exactly. And he's always going to test you. Now, I say this to you, and like, for instance, let's say I have a good friend of mine in Mexico. He was the one that told me about getting a horse to dance. He's a great horseman. In fact, he's known as a big singing charro. He's an actor, a vocalist. He doesn't have time to train his horses. I'm sure if he had the time, he would have been one of the better trainers, but he never had the time because he's always so busy. So he had to have trainers like myself train a horse for him. So I would talk to him and say, okay, listen, this is what you got to do. If you're going to get this movement that you want, you're going to have to touch him here to pick this leg up, turn it loose, touch him here and pick this leg up. Okay. The horse knows right away because his cues are not right on time. The horse kind of figures, oh, we got another guy on top of me. I wonder if I can get away without picking my feet quite so high. So what he'll do is he'll cheat. Have it been me, I'd say, got to do it. Reach over my little crop and touch him on that foot. But this guy didn't. So he says, oh, I got him. I ain't going to do it. But what happens is the show's over. So he got by the show. He brings him back to me and say, now you train him. So I guess what I'm trying to say, if you're not an active trainer and you're not actively training the horse, you've got to keep active. You've got to keep training the horse and to keep him going. Then you're going to have other horses that other trainers have trained, and you ride them. I don't do that, and I don't want the folks. That's why this series is said. We call it train your own horse, because you're going to have to. You can send it to another trainer. Maybe this trainer specializes in breaking horses or a reining horses or one roping horse, whatever. He's going to be trained that way, but he didn't train you. And that horse is going to know that you don't know what that trainer knows, and he's going to cheat on you. That's why it's so important. You ride your own horse. Now, in my seminars, if I can, Terry, I work with each horse. I won't have 3 or 4 people in the ring at the same time. I don't want that. I want one-on-one. I'm with you for a couple of hours, and we're going to look at your horse, and we're going to look at your technique, and we're going to see where I can help you. I don't want anybody else there.
So what about the person that doesn't have unlimited time to train their horse? Can you work with them successfully? The person that has a job to go to every day and can only work with their horse, say, 5 days a week after work, can you still be successful?
Well, that's what I did. I worked all my life, and I would ride the horses in the evening. A lot of these techniques that I developed was because of that. I had to find a way to advance and to communicate with the horse because I didn't have all that much time.
Well, Al, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We wish you well. We hope we see you on down the road.
Oh, I'm sure you will. I read your newsletter every month that you put it out, and you do have a lot of interesting things. And thank you so much for having enough interest in me to want to hear what I had to say.
Diane?
It's just been our pleasure, and we look forward to learning more from you as time goes by.
Thank you very much, Diane Terry. Diane Terry Nielsen, ladies and gentlemen, from the Texas Horse News. Until next time, Al Ragusin says, enjoy your horse and be safe.